So welcome everybody. And thank you for the ones who've already introduced themselves. For the ones who haven't, feel free to do so in the chat box. Welcome to our panel discussion today. We are going to talk about how to launch your career in tech, even if you don't have a technical background. My name is Nitzan Cohen-Arazi, and I'm the co-founder and COO here at Jolt. We're hosting this panel, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. And before I hand it over to our brilliant panelists to introduce themselves, I have a couple of just housekeeping notes to share with you. So first of all, we're recording this session. We'll be sharing it with you guys over email after the event, and we'll be sharing the recording and any additional resources that come up in the conversation. So you don't have to take notes. You can feel free to just listen in. And if you have any questions that come up throughout the discussion for anyone specific or for the panelists generally, feel free to pop those into the Q&A box as well, and we'll get to these questions at the end or even throughout the conversation. We'll aim to leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for these questions, so we are sure you all get your answers. I'm ready to jump in. So I'm gonna hand it over to our panelists, first of all, for an introduction. We'll start in alphabetical order. We'll start with Eve. Please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the panel. I'm very excited to be here with you guys today. So a little bit about me and why I'm here talking to you guys today and being part of this panel. So I'm originally from Switzerland. I now live in Israel, and I ended up in tech sort of randomly and fell in love with the field. So here's the first reason why it makes sense that I will be talking to you guys today. So a little bit about my background. I actually did a bachelor's in international relations here in Israel. At the end of my bachelor's degree, I didn't really know what to do with myself, but I did know that life was pretty cool in Israel, so I was going to stay, and high tech was a big thing here. So I said, okay, well, let's see, how that goes, and I ended up in a PPC position at a small company that I don't know if you know, called Wix. Wix at the time was already quite big, and actually this is where I learned what marketing is, what growth marketing is, what search engine marketing, which was exactly what I was doing there, was all about. And I fell in love with the field. I discovered the field of growth, which is a field that is in full expansion and explosion all of the time. And I said, great, let's do that for a living for the long run. And so this is what I've been doing since. After Wix, I moved to Fiverr, which at the time was rather small, and today it's also a gigantic beast, just like Wix. There, I started learning a whole bunch of additional things, and I expanded my scope and my skill sets. I then moved to Ireland. I worked at Google. At Google, I actually worked on the French market, so I was actually traveling around a lot. And long story short, I decided eventually to come back to Israel and to start advising a whole bunch of companies in the field of growth marketing, which by then became my expertise. I today act as the head of acquisition at JoyTunes, but I also advise a whole bunch of different companies in Israel. And I am, if anything, I am one of the proofs that you don't need to be an engineer in order to make it into tech, and you don't need to have a computer science degree in order to, succeed in tech and to build a whole career in it. So I really hope that we'll get to have a fruitful discussion around this today, and feel free to ask any questions. This is an opportunity to talk to some of us who made it without all of those technical SC stuff in our CV. So that's me. Nitzan, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you, Eve. And we'll touch on a few of the points you mentioned in your introduction in a bit. Michael?
Sure. So, hello everyone. Great to be here. Now, my foray into tech, startups, and fintech was also kind of by accident, I guess. About 10 years or so ago, I joined a company called Crowdcube, At that point, Crowdcube, there was only a couple of guys that they had an idea. I was kind of part of the founding team there, even though I was an intern. But for anyone that doesn't know, Crowdcube's an online fundraising platform. Raised lots of money, 400 million or so for 850 companies, guys like Monzo, Revolut, Brewdog, those type of people. So I left university and actually had a job at Procter & Gamble, a very typical kind of grad scheme, and joined Crowdcube as an intern just for a few months. But again, just fell in love with the flexibility and kind of accountability that I was given at those early days, and really never looked back. So I was there for 7 or 8 years, built out that company and did a variety of different roles, from the very early days as what we call an investment manager, but it was kind of more of a jack of all trades, doing anything that dealt with customers or operations, to booking events, to literally anything. And that's quite typical at the earliest stages of companies. I was then the head of equity, so running sales, partnerships, account management, and the kind of end-to-end startup journey. And then lastly, as the ops director, so managing cross-functional teams, helping us kind of scale to grow net revenue. And that was much more kind of strategic, OKR driven, working on kind of escalation handling and resourcing and leading projects rather than actually kind of running them. But I left there a little while back now, and have done a few other things since. So most notably after that, I started another company called Juno, where I was the chief revenue officer. And Juno is an open banking payments company for small businesses. And I really kind of missed the team and ownership journey, and started that with a couple of Crowdcube alumni. But from a founder's perspective there, what I was doing really was building the tech, the systems, hiring, all the FCA authorization stuff. But from the CRO perspective, the chief revenue officer perspective, that was a mix of sitting between kind of commercial, marketing, technology, finance, and executing that go-to-market strategy, making sure really, I guess, the pricing, testing, revenue growth tactics, and all of that type of stuff was on point. And I've actually started another company called Everything, which is now in incognito mode, and I'm the COO there, so the Chief Operations Officer there. So you can see I've done a multitude of different things across kind of commercial ops and various other things throughout my career. So I think, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself in the startup space. You can kind of reinvent yourself a few times. But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Or you can just start tons of companies, Michael. It seems.
Yes, all that.
Thank you for that. We'll get back to some of that shortly. And Uri, please tell us about yourself.
Thanks so much. Excited to be with all of you today. So hi, my name is Uri Snyder. I'm 34, just about 35, originally from Philadelphia. I've been living in Israel for about 12 years. My career journey started very, very far from here. I had a dream of getting into, can't seem to open my video. Okay, somebody will take care of that.
Yeah, I'll respond.
I started my career path actually wanting to get into political communication and organizing. I got my bachelor's in international relations at Penn State in the US. Worked in DC for a little bit in political lobbying, worked in Israel at the Knesset. And over the course of that time, found that there was a big difference in terms of things that I was interested in versus one of the ways that I wanted to make money over the course of my career, which is a great learning as you grow. Ended up getting my MBA at Tel Aviv University. And at the time when I was leaving, I would have told you that I was interested in getting into business development. I have no idea what business development is. I think many people who try to get into it don't. It sounds sexier, it sounds much cooler than getting into sales. And at the time, I never thought that this was going to be a direction that I took. But a good friend of mine was working at SimilarWeb, and they had just raised $30 million. They're a marketing analytics software. And they were building up a sales team, and I was just unbelievably impressed with the quality of people and product. And so I joined the company as an SMB salesperson. I was an individual contributor working full funnel before we had an enterprise team. So we were selling to anybody of any size, anywhere in the world. And it was one of the best experiences of my life. And that was 7 years ago. And over the course of all of those years, I've worked my way from working in sales to managing a team to managing a division. And now I'm one of the VPs in the business. I manage all of our commercial operations out of Tel Aviv, both new business and account management. And, you know, I, like everybody else, seem to have fallen into this backwards and definitely don't have any technical qualifications to be doing this job. It is a very, very, very broad industry that demands all of our talent and creativity. And excited to talk to you guys more about some of the best practices, I think, for how you can dive deeper into one of the most meaningful and rewarding career paths I think there are.
Wow. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ori, and thank you all once again for joining us today. I'm sure this is going to be a rich discussion, and I want to welcome all of the additional participants that have joined us during this introduction. You're not too late. We just went through the intro of all of our brilliant 3 panelists, and we're now diving into the questions. So thank you guys for joining as well. So we'll jump in, and I'm gonna just share, you know, this, a report online, a recent report online has revealed hiring in the tech sector in the UK has reached its highest level in 5 years. I'm sure this doesn't come as a surprise to the panelists here, but maybe to some of you listening. More than 100,000 job vacancies going live every week since February. At the same time, every week, a unicorn company is being created, right? A $1 billion company. And it's clear that in the UK, in the tech, the UK is in a tech boom and has bounced back after the pandemic. And there's a lot of opportunity for people starting out their careers to climb the ladder. A key thing to bear in mind is that only a portion of those 100,000 jobs are actual technical jobs, as you 3 mentioned, that you don't have to take those. You don't have to be a software engineer or a web developer to actually succeed and make your way in the tech sector. So my first question for you 3 is, for someone just starting out their career, we talk a lot about, do what you love and find the passion in what you do, and, make sure those come together. That's a pretty threatening, pretty challenging mission for young adults starting out their career. So what kind of practical tips can you guys give to people just starting out their career in the first question that they would have, which is, what I actually want to do? How do I find that title out of so many titles? How do I know where to aim at first? And I'll direct it to all of you, whoever wants to share first.
Sure, I don't mind going first on that. And I think from my point of view, I feel like I've reinvented myself and what I want to do so many different times that I don't think this question ever gets old, even for those kind of slightly later in their career. But I didn't know what I wanted to do, and from my background, you can hear that I thought I wanted to go and start a graduate scheme at Procter & Gamble, but I never arrived. So what I did, and what I always advise people to do, is just accept that you don't necessarily you don't have to know exactly what you want to do on day one, and go and try a few different things. Go and experience a few different options. Go and be an intern, do some work experience at various companies. And actually throughout my time at Crowdcube in particular, whenever we had a smart person, I can remember about 4 or 5, that would drop an email out the blue or give us a call and say, look, I really like what you're doing. I can bring this to the table. I can bring some marketing skills, or I'm great with social, or I'd like to learn about this. More often than not, because lots of these companies are in need of resource and don't necessarily have the time or budget to go out and find them. It's great when those opportunities arrive. So I think that's certainly something from my point of view. But what I've done more recently, as I've started to again kind of reinvent myself in my time after Crowdcube and work out what it was that I actually was passionate about, I used a tool called Wait But Why, and it's a really good resource. It's an online blog, a guy who can talk to you about finding your passion, and there's a little journey that you go through. And actually, quite interestingly, I went all the way through that journey, and it pointed me back towards starting businesses. So I guess it recalibrated with me that I was on the right journey the whole time, and for me that was really helpful. But yeah, go and check out Wait But Why. It's a really good. There's a really good section on kind of finding your passion and working out what will make you happy and point you in that direction.
Thank you. Before you guys I want to add another little question to this question and ask you, as you answer, did you always feel qualified for the next role you were going to do? Or how much of it did you actually know? And how much % did you learn like on the job?
Well, not even a little bit. I wish I felt like I was qualified to do the job that I was going to do each time before I was walking into it. But this is a luxury, or I would call it a boring luxury that you don't get in high tech. Instead of it, you get the exciting challenge of undertaking something you know nothing about. I personally, when I got into tech, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did know what I did not want to do. And that's, I found, is very useful. When you don't know what's coming, what you want to do with your life, a good thing is to eliminate all the things you really know you don't want to do. It really helps narrow down the list. And it helps also when you speak to HR companies, by the way. I found this very useful. When I finished my BA, I reached out to a whole bunch of, HR companies that are quite big in Israel, like Misha and the like. And I was like, yeah, so this is me. I have a BA in international relations. I'm not going to do international relations. I speak French. I'm good at math. What do you think? And it was very hard for them to guide me. But when I started calling them again and telling them, okay, here are the things I know I don't want to do, they were like, okay, now we can work with this. You've already narrowed this down significantly. So now we can direct you somewhere that makes sense. So one tip that I would give you if you really don't know what's next is to eliminate anything that you can eliminate. And definitely, one of the things that as the one panelist here, beyond from Nitan, of course, who's a woman, you're going to hear a lot about the fact that women tend to apply only to positions they are qualified to do. And one of the things that I've learned in tech is that if there's one industry where we prove this wrong, it's this one. Don't apply to things that you're qualified to do. The truth is that if you apply only to positions you're fully qualified for, the trade-off of it is that you're not going to learn much. And that's a huge price to pay. There is no size of paycheck that will justify this, that will justify you going to work and getting nothing other than the paycheck in the end of the month. So I would recommend to actually, when you look at positions, to try and get inspired by them. If the position inspires you, like the description of the job inspires you, but you realize you're only partially qualified, then this is the place where you should apply. Because it essentially means that you will bring something to the table, but you'll also learn a lot. And in high tech, your biggest currency as a candidate is the knowledge you acquire along the way. So that would be my tip in terms of how to figure out what you want to do next.
Thank you. That's awesome.
So I'll say that there are a few things that annoy me more than the advice of do what you're passionate about, telling somebody in their early 20s that's the direction they should take. I know a lot of people who've been working for 10, 20, 30 years and still don't know what they're passionate about, or it changes dramatically over time. So it's a question that leaves you feeling either like A, you could fall down a rabbit hole, or B, like you're totally lost, and don't fall into that trap. I'll definitely double down on Eve's advice of thinking about things you don't want to do as opposed to things you do want to do. But I'll take a bit of a different angle too. It's not just what do you want to do, it's also where do you want to do it. When you're beginning your career, the company that you enter can either be a job in and of itself, or it can be an environment in which it enables and nurtures your ability to grow. And really, really good companies look at people that are entry-level employees, not just on the value of the job that they're able to do in that very moment, but on the fact that you make up a pool of candidates that they look at as potential leaders over the course of the next 3 to 5 to 7 years. And so I generally try to advise people to be very, very, very discerning about what are the types of companies that they want to work for, who are the types of people that they want to work with, and to think about this as, you know, I'm not really looking for what's my first job. I'm looking for what's my first home. Where is a place that I could stay for the next few years and build a career and build a skill set that suddenly leaves me incredibly valued in the industry and gives me a set of knowledge that can be rinsed and repeated in order to be able to develop a career path that in the long run makes you happy and gives you options. I think that that's just super critical. And in terms of the question of, did you feel qualified for the job that you were given? I don't think there's ever been a job that I've gotten that I felt qualified to do in tech in the day that I had it. I'll tell a funny story. The day that I got promoted to be VP, one of my colleagues was leaving. And so we went downstairs and there's a bar like right underneath the office. And somebody was like, congratulations, I'm so happy for you. And my first comment was, Jesus, I just hope I don't screw it up. That was the first thing that came out of my mouth. And it's that pressure, that feeling of being on the edge of your comfort zone that forces you to get that much better. And that is the hidden beauty of working in this industry, that it always pushes you to something that you previously didn't think you had the capability to do. And suddenly a year or two later, it's something in which you're completely fluent and kind of ready for your next challenge that you don't know how to tackle yet.
Thank you, Uri. I'm actually going to follow up with a question for you specifically about sales. So some of the things we hear from our graduates many times is that they don't necessarily understand the role of sales for a few reasons. A classic salesperson is something that people still maybe have in their mind of, you know, people that would walk door to door with, encyclopedias, or, you know, insurance salesmen and things like that. And, you know, on one hand, people don't learn sales in school. And there are a lot of different kind of sales roles in the different tech companies. So what do you think would be the qualification? Like, how would someone know that sales is something that they should be looking into if they don't have any sales experience?
It's a great question. I think that one of the biggest travesties of both business school and formal education in general is that they don't talk about what sales is and how many people over the course of their career came from a background in which they were selling. I think it's the Thomas Pink book that's like, everybody sells. I've got it on my shelf. I can go grab it afterwards. But number one is you have to ask yourself a question, which is that, do you want to be client facing or not? Do I want to spend most of my time having external meetings with people about the product or the company that I work for? And do I enjoy speaking to people? That is a huge component of if you like working in sales. And the second is, are you goal oriented? You know, when you wake up in the morning, what is it that you want to achieve? And whether it's, you know, I talk to a lot of salespeople and it's, you know, whether I want to just hit a goal and that gets me excited, or whether it's the fact that I'm financially motivated. But I'll make an argument that I think working in sales is quite possibly the best job you could have. It is incredibly diverse. It is the best boot camp you could have for any other profession that you want to go in. Any other pivot that you want to make in your career, if you tell them that I was a successful salesperson at X and Y company, nobody's going to look at you any other way except for with big eyes and excitement, because it means that you know how to sell a product. It means you know how to sell yourself. It means you have good communication skills. And I think that sales, the real value that I don't think a lot of you are going to want to hear, but sales pushes you and tests every weakness and insecurity that you have inside of you. There are very few other jobs where you hear no 75, 80% of the time, and you need to be resilient and build and still maintain the confidence to be great at what you do. And over the course of that process, it makes you stronger and it gives you a level of grit that is just incredibly valuable. And, you know, I remember in my first 5 months ramping up in my initial sales role at the company I'm in now, I mean, I almost got fired. I almost quit, couldn't handle it. And being able to overcome that obstacle is something that I carry with me today and is something that I think is incredibly valuable. So I will happily lead the mantra that I think getting into sales for many young people is the best path that they can take.
Wow. It seems like you have found what you're passionate about, Uri. Or at least, you know, you're just a great salesperson. Thank you for that. That's incredibly helpful. Michael, I want to also touch on something that you mentioned was about, and also Uri mentioned it. There are a lot of, there's a lot of jobs out there, and that means that there are a lot of companies out there, and companies are different. They range in different industries, from fintech to food tech and agri-tech, and also different sizes and different stages of the company, from startup to scale up to, Wix up. So my question to you is, how do I get in front of the right people? What lessons or advice can you share about how to find the right companies for me, or for someone to work at, instead of me just spending time, hundreds of hours applying, kind of spraying and praying? What would be the things that you look for when looking for your next job?
Yeah, no problems at all. Well, I guess you have hit the nail on the head, and I'll probably hand over to some of the other guys to talk a little bit more about the later stages, because I've predominantly been in the early. But I think there's an important distinction, and in the early stages, you need to think about what you want from the company. Are you more focused on the functional relevance of your particular role, be it sales, be it technical, be it marketing, or at the very earliest stages, you really need to be kind of a proactive self-starter, have lots of kind of self-belief, and dealing with ambiguity needs to be something that you're comfortable with, and then touching on what Uri said, resilience as well. But yeah, like if you're looking to get in front of the right people, and you've made that decision that you know a little bit more about the stage that you're looking to go into, and the type of businesses that you're interested in, then I think there's probably a few things that you can do, and a number of them I've actually done quite recently. I'm moving over to Stockholm, which is one of the reasons that I started a new business with some of the guys. But for earlier stage startups, one of the things that, as well as a brilliant salesman, Uri, one of the things that's super helpful is just the value add to the company. And it's a really busy industry. There are lots of jobs out there, but one of the challenges with hiring from an early stage startup is you don't have any time. So if you can look at someone's personal brand, if they've positioned themselves as an expert in whatever it might be, and that can be writing a blog once a week on a topic that you're interested in, or a topic that's relevant to the company, then that's absolutely fantastic. And that value add and that exposure for the company is brilliant. I think as well, you need to go out and start to find the right people in those spaces. So go to networking events, go and have an idea of the area that you want to work in, and go hunting. Ask for introductions there. I've done this countless times throughout my career, and I've had conversations actually fairly recently at the Stockholm, one of the Stockholm fintech meets, where someone came up to me and just asked what I did, and asked for some advice, and actually asked if I knew anyone in particular business sector that they were looking for. And I did a couple of introductions to them. So people are really willing to help, but I think you need to be super proactive. I think lastly, and that this links to one of the kind of initial points that I mentioned, and that's that people in startups, hiring managers, particularly in startups, who are quite often founders, are really time poor. So you have to stand out a little bit from the crowd, and there are a couple of ways you can do this. But one of the most prominent and to this day now, I still remember it, fascinating examples, was one of my very first hires at Crowdcube, a guy called Mike. He was a sales guy as well, so maybe he's been borrowing some of your tactics, Uri. But he put in an application, and he wasn't really qualified at all for the role. Like, he hadn't really done much business development at that point, and I guess we just overlooked him a little bit. And then he drove down. He drove about 200 miles in his camper van and just arrived at the office unannounced, didn't tell anyone that he was coming, and asked for a meeting with me. And he got the job straight away, like that, for particularly in that business development sphere, just doing something a little bit different. It just put him right to the top of the crowd, because he knew that he had brilliant interpersonal skills, and he knew that he couldn't get that across in his CV, in a kind of cover letter, and doing those type of things. That's a game changer for me. And there are a number of examples throughout my career where where I've hired people on the basis of doing something a little bit different. But I think the other side to that coin is that in the same way, particularly as you might sell a product, you need to be super resilient. You need to keep going. So you need to be doing outreach as well. And I did this when I was learning to build a new network in Stockholm. I didn't know anyone, but I downloaded the LinkedIn Sales Navigator. I set up free trials on Zoom Info. I built a hit list of the people I wanted to speak to. And then I crafted like a short section on my bio and a longer section on my bio. And I bombarded people from every angle, just introducing myself to the right people, even if they weren't available, asking to be introduced to the right person at the company. And that kind of sales outreach to hit those decision makers from all angles quite often does bubble you to the top, because just completing an application for a job role, you can so easily get missed. I've missed hundreds of probably brilliant candidates just because I didn't have time or I rushed reading through the applications. So yeah, be persistent. I think that's important. If you do find something that you're really interested in, don't just give up. Even if they say no, don't just give up. Mm-hmm. There was a brilliant business development person, Katerina, who sent in an application and was unfortunately told no. And then she replied by video, explaining why we'd made the worst decision we'd make in the business development team at Crowdcube, and resultingly got the job off the back of that, because it was brilliant retort to why we actually didn't want to hire her. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Amazing. I'm going to turn it to Eve with kind of a deeper dive into one of the things that Michael mentioned, but I also want to share with you guys that you can write all of your questions in the chat box or the Q&A box. I think they're pretty similar, and we will get to them, okay, in a couple of minutes. So I just want to, Eve, Michael mentioned this kind of stand out in the crowd and gave some great examples. I want to hear from you. Perhaps you have more specific or additional specific kind of examples when it comes to standing out in the crowd in, again, non-technical roles, right? They're less measurable. You know, if you're a great business development person or user experience or even HR, how do I make myself stand out? How do I kind of emphasize the value that I can add into the company, if not technical? And in addition, in these big companies, right? You got some incredible kind of brands in your background, like Google and Fiverr and Wix. It's not like joining a new like a 10 people company. How do you stand out there?
Yeah, so I would say there's several things. Like, first of all, I actually slightly disagree with the thing that if you're not in a technical role, then it's less measurable. In high-tech companies, we have a tendency to over-measure everything. So we will measure above and beyond. Like the HR person will have a KPI for the quarter and they will have to meet it. And so you actually do have, it does simplify your ability to stand out, because you know exactly what you need to achieve in order to perform on par, and you know what you have to, like, by how much you have to overachieve in order to stand out. But I will say that one of the biggest lessons that I learned in my first job at Wix was that sometimes what allows you to stand out is just to have what we call in Hebrew chutzpah, or to have essentially the guts and the impoliteness, if necessary, to go and push yourself where you want to be. When I joined Wix, so it was my first job ever, and it was also my first job in the field. I was very lucky to join an organization that was already quite mature, which allowed me to learn from brilliant people, which is, by the way, one of the things that I do recommend to consider. If you don't have any experience and feel like it will be too much of a leap to do what Michael did and, you know, go straight into the unknown and be a quality contributor from day one, you can also redirect to more mature companies where you will have more senior people that will be able to teach you. This is what eventually happens to me. So I was working there and I was quite discreet and in my corner, and I was performing well. I was performing very well against the KPIs that I was given, and this is what allowed me to, you know, take in more projects and things like that. But the moment that I understood that there was essentially a sort of, I found myself in front of a fork was when Wix took on to do its first Super Bowl campaign. And I was definitely not the person most qualified to participate in what they called the war room for the Super Bowl in my team. But I said, you know what, this sounds like an opportunity for me to go and do something that, I mean, 6 months ago, I didn't even know what it's about. I'm not a football fan, so I really had no idea what the Super Bowl was all about. And I just decided, you know, to go and ask to be part of the war room team. So I went to the then head of acquisition, which was 2 levels above me, and I told him I want to be part of the Super Bowl team. And he was like, okay, great. Why you? And then I was like, well, that's a great question. Let me think about that. I told him, I mean, beyond the fact that I'm very excited and stuff, you know, and he told me, okay, you have 24 hours to prove to me that you are the one in your team who should be part of that room, who should be taken out of your daily job to go and do, you know, to be part of this group. And so I took 24 hours and I did the biggest amount of research that I've ever done in my life. And I essentially compiled a huge amount of research about what search engine marketing should be about during the Super Bowl campaign. How does it support all the other efforts that the campaign is actually you know, focused on, etc. And so I essentially built a strategy from the ground up based only on research that I did online. And I came to him with this document and I told him, well, this is why you should put me in this team, because this is what I would do if you put me there. And I got the gig, and it was really like a completely new chapter for me, because I understood that everything I do in this field has to do with how much research I'm willing to put in and how much out there I'm willing to put myself. So all of this, well, sorry, to tell you that I think that in order to stand out in high tech, especially in startups, what you need to do is to show that you have the willingness and the ability to learn a lot and very fast. This is essentially what I've bet on along my entire career. I can tell you that when I joined Google and suddenly my team, whom I used to have, you know, about like 4 or 7 people in, suddenly was 40 people. I realized that if I'm not able and willing to learn a lot very fast, there is no way I will stand out. Google hires some of the most brilliant people out there. There's excellent teams out there. And so I understood that this is essentially what I need to bet on. Now, there's many ways to do this. There's a lot that you can do in preparation. For example, completing a course with Joel that will prepare you to a certain career path and stuff is one of the things that you can do. But the truth is, though, that in high tech, because everything changes a lot very fast, you need to learn all the time. Today, I'm in a very senior position. I manage teams. You know, I advise some of the most successful startups in Israel, but I still have to learn all of the time because this field changes all the time. If I don't learn, then I will be behind in a matter of months. So this would be my biggest recommendation. Learn, show that you have learned, show that you have prepared before you came to the interview, that you have done your research, that you're excited about the job, that potentially you're also excited about the mission of the company. This is especially important when you enter an early stage startup because things are going to get wild and you're going to have to need something to hold on to in order to keep fighting. And really demonstrate that in your interview and throughout your job.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Eve. So Eve mentioned here already, we're kind of a switch to the employer or, you know, to the hiring manager things that you would be looking for. Uri, would you have anything to add when it comes to, you know, a lot of the hires that you made? What are the things that you're looking for in candidates? If, you know, Eve mentioned the ability to learn and the ability to kind of step outside of your comfort zone. And also the stability that you would emphasize on. What are things that you would be looking for in a candidate, both professionally but also culturally or DNA-ish?
Sure. So I think one of the first things, and I wanted to touch on something Michael was talking about, is that you're always being evaluated over the course of the process, and the process isn't always formal. So for instance, if you're, let's say you send in your resume, you don't hear anything back. If you make the effort and you go on LinkedIn and you create a message and you have that proactive outreach, it's not just that you're sending me a note, it's that I'm envisioning when I'm getting that note, what you're capable of doing if you come and work at my business. And so I think that there's a component where you should always be aware that the behaviors that you're showing to somebody over the course of an interaction with them is allowing them to envision what it is that you're capable of doing in the workplace. And one of the questions that Lynn asked was about people midlife who are switching into some of these fields and how difficult it is. I think that that's one of the big advantages that comes from people switching into technology who are not at the beginning of their career. There are a ton of basic business skills that we look for in terms of people getting into the industry that you possess and possess in spades. And it's critical for you to be able to show that to the hiring manager, whether it is the way in which you approach yourself or how you speak or active listening or any of the number of things that make you successful in an interview. I think that's one of the places where you have a leg up when you're coming from an existing career and you're looking to transition into tech. I guess the last thing that I'll share that I look for is I'm looking for raw talent and upside potential. So for me, I look at communication skills. That's something that is very, very difficult to teach. And so when especially by the way, in this COVID environment, be aware of the fact that how you communicate in person over a cup of coffee is very different than how you communicate over Zoom. And so taking the time to be able to really be aware of how do I come across when I'm speaking on camera? Am I making eye contact with the camera? Am I looking away? Am I being distracting to people? Like these kinds of things really, really matter as they're coming across in an interview. And then lastly is your ability and willingness to learn over the course of a process. So for instance, if in an interview, I mention something that's important to me, and then during the presentation, you actually bring it up, that's really critical for me in terms of being able to diagnose if you have what it takes to be successful in this role over the course of years, and especially in a startup environment where things change every few months.
And maybe already kind of jumping into the Q&A from the audience, Uri, if you can kind of continue the kind of same thread covering the switch from from a big company, not necessarily in tech, to a startup. This is a question from Julian.
Sure. I think it's a great question, and it is kind of the career path that I think makes the most sense, which is that when you're in your early 20s and you just finished school, that you go to a larger company that can give you this, it's almost like a master's degree in business, if you will, except it's just super practical. You know, you're kind of tapping into their networks, or by the way, you're tapping into their brand. So in other words, when you go to apply for another job later on, you've got that brand on your CV, which instantly is recognizable. And then you take that experience that you had in kind of a corporate structured setting. Sorry, my dog's very talkative. Knew that was going to happen. And you take that experience and then you go jump into something totally unstructured. Like Eve said, kind of a wild experience where everybody is running as fast as they can to find growth and success. And you're basically leveraging your ability to take all of that formal knowledge, education, and experience that you had at this well-oiled machine and go bring it to this startup that everybody's trying to push up a mountain as fast as they can. And I think that just makes so much sense and is a great career path for people over time.
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts on that, and I'd definitely echo everything that Uri's just said. But over my time at Crowdcube and more recently actually at Juno as well, we've quite often hired non-startup generalists and hired from much bigger companies. And I think first and foremost, you have to have a feel for why you want to go and work for a startup. And there's a question from Lynn about how challenging is it for a mid-professional to switch, saying that she thinks startup and scale-up jobs are mostly geared for graduates. That certainly isn't true at all. But issues like salary and benefits, I think if you are going to work, particularly at an earlier stage startup, I think if you're looking at a scale up, so Stripe, for example, they're a big company now, but for a while they've been paying really, really competitive salaries. And lots of the companies like Revolut that have gone through those unicorn cycles, I raised money for those guys back in the early days, and they were paying good salaries to experienced guys that they brought in from corporate finance, from other professions, from a relatively early age. But the very earliest stage of startup, you're getting on board that journey not really because you want to earn the highest salary or you want the best benefit package. If that's what you want, then you should go and work at a corporate. You're getting on board that because you're looking for some of the other things, and you're going to take a little bit in the earlier stages. You're going to take a little bit of a hit on salary, but what you need to learn is how you negotiate the compensation and remuneration to make that risk proportionate. So you need to be looking at, okay, what are my options? How much equity am I going to get? And what's that going to look like? Not now, not in 2 or 3 years. What's that going to look like in 5 or 7 years? And actually, that's what, if you're joining a startup, you shouldn't just really be joining it for the good work-life balance and some of the other things that people think are kind of commensurate with startups, but really to get on board that journey and look at the long-term upside. And if you pick the right one, that you should be earning in 10 years, you could be earning in 10 years a lot more than you would have earned in salary at a big corporate. And that's really the trade-off. It's a risk reward trade-off. And if you look at the first 80 employees at Revolut, they're all millionaires now. And some of them were senior, many of them were junior, but I think that's really important in the switch. You don't have to think that it's just for graduates. There's plenty of people out there looking for experienced hires, and I think it's about how you can translate your transferable skills into that particular industry. So I wouldn't worry about that at all, Lynn and Julian.
I'd love to add a couple more things about that. The one concern that I have when I hire someone who's from a big company and I'm hiring for a startup is that I know that I'm hiring somebody who comes with a lot of knowledge, because clearly you've been there, right? Clearly you've been doing the job. Clearly you're coming probably more qualified than a lot of the other candidates that come in that didn't come from a big company. The big question that I ask myself though, and what I'm trying to gauge in the interview, is whether or not you're going to pull up your sleeves. Because in the end, when you work in a startup, that's what you're doing. You're here to build from scratch. And you're going to have to do things that maybe in your former corporate job, you could just delegate. And here you can't. One of the things that we've mentioned a few times is that startups are low on resources by definition, right? And so that's essentially what I'm looking for. I know that I'm probably hiring you with a lot of knowledge and experience, but when it comes down to it, when there's this, I don't know, this client that's about to leave and you have to, make the call and chase them or whatever, or when you have this campaign that just, broke down and you need to figure out another way to keep running, to keep being out there. Are you going to figure this out by yourself because you don't have any other resources to help you? Or are you going to say, well, I don't know, I'm sort of senior, I'm used to delegate this. And if there's nobody to delegate, then okay, so never mind. This is essentially what I'm looking for. And the second thing, just to echo one of the points of Michael about the equity, this is essentially the big thing. You're going to take a lower salary in the hope that the equity is going to be worth a ton. In 10 years is a rather short lifespan. If you put as your goal in these 10 years to become quite rich, it's a relatively short time span when you think about it. So this is essentially the trade-off that you make. But it's definitely worth it. That's the one thing that I can tell you. And besides, the excitement that you're going to get along the way will make it even more worth it. If you're the type who likes the roller coasters, then this is for you for sure.
Awesome.
I totally agree. I just want to touch on one thing that Michael said, which is, first of all, the equity piece is, we could spend another hour just talking about salary and compensation and how to evaluate it, because it is so unbelievably important. But one of the things I do want to touch on from the topic of transitioning from an established company to a startup is be aware in the difference in how knowledgeable the business is in giving you achievable quota. And this is specifically for salespeople. In other words, when you go to an established business and they give you a quota that is based on years and years and years of repeated experience of seeing people succeed and fail. Whereas when you're looking at a startup and you just don't have that much previous experience of seeing what's achievable, I see a lot of time people get these offers on paper that look very, very different than the real world dynamics of if they're able to achieve that. And so it's just really important when you're weighing an offer, or you're looking at going from a large company to a startup, or even just getting into a startup to begin with. You have to understand what are the questions you need to ask to be able to evaluate the opportunity and to understand how much risk you're taking on and how much reward and upside you've actually pre-negotiated into the contract, or even what's on the cusp. In other words, if I do good at this role, what is my next step and what could I be able to achieve? And so I just think that this topic of risk reward in startups that Michael brought up couldn't be more important, and is it's just not talked about enough, especially with people at the beginning of their career.
And on that, I want to ask Uri one more little addition to that, which is again a question coming from Julian right now, and try to make it short because after that we'll have a kind of a quick wrap up question. How do you address the viability of an early stage startup? I think it connects to the risk reward, right? But how do you know whether this is the startup to kind of
This is the $1 million question. I think speaking of millionaires, we'd all be there much quicker if we were able to evaluate this earlier. I think there are a few things that I'd look for. Number one is you want to look at previous investment that they've been able to achieve, and especially if it's repeatable. So in other words, if I saw that somebody got a seed round at 1 to 5 million, and I saw that they got a B round that was at 10 to 15, that means that they've been able to tell that story in a compelling way. And not to mention the fact they've been able to go back and get more money afterwards. They achieved their baseline goals and then they went back. So that shows that they've been able to reach some level of success already. That's a big one. The second is really the co-founders. I mean, for me, I think it's a very, very big thing. Especially with startups, if they're Series B, C, you can go online and you can find a lot of material about who these people are, what is their background, maybe even interviews of how they talk. Most of the time, from my experience, companies follow the lead of their co-founder and CEO, especially when it's the person who built the company from scratch. And really getting an idea of how to understand what that culture is going to be like before you walk in the door is super valuable, not only to your work-life experience, but also to the potential success of the business. Last but not least, and this is going to be kind of corny and wonky, but I look to see if the business is a moat. Like I want to be able to understand if there's some semblance of the technology that makes it more competitive in the marketplace or less easy to copy, or there's some unique differentiator that makes them special and potentially even can define a segment of the market that might not exist yet. Those are the really exciting ideas. And so you really need to be able to evaluate the business from the perspective of, tactics and behavior, culture, as well as purely from a business analysis perspective separately.
Yeah, I think, sorry, just one final thing to add to that, because it's a question that needs to come up, particularly in your early conversations. At the very earliest stage of business, there isn't much data on these companies, but you can find a couple of things. I would say it's always important, a question to ask: what's your runway? You might find that they've done a funding round and that's brilliant, but find out how much cash they've got left in the bank, just so you're not starting on a journey that's doomed to fail to start with. So people don't mind you asking those tough questions. Actually, they kind of value that. So I would definitely ask that in those interviews.
Thank you.
Great point.
Okay, so we're coming up to the end, and I would want to wrap up so we don't go over time too much. For the ones that have to drop out on the minute, thank you for joining us, and feel free to add any additional things in the chat. And for our lovely panelists, I want to end with a question again for all of you, which I would love to hear. What was the exciting piece of kind of working in tech when you first started your journey, and how has that changed over the years? Or have the things that kind of bring excitement and passion into your role just starting up different from the ones currently in your current positions? And if you have any kind of additional thoughts to leave the crowd with as we wrap up.
It's a tough question. You could see all of us looking up into the right, trying to dig into the back part of our brain.
Especially because you all said you started in tech by accident, pretty much.
Yeah. I can answer this one. So one of the reasons actually that I never went to my graduate scheme at Procter and Gamble and stayed getting paid what was probably at that point a semi-illegal wage at a startup that hadn't raised any money yet was because I was given trust and accountability from day one. And I remember speaking to my peers who had all gone and done their graduate schemes, and they were doing kind of boring, monotonous things like, I don't know, it could be from admin to various other bits and bobs. And I was out there speaking to the media like 3 months into my job. And my co-founders there were just like, look, we don't know what we're doing either. You're as experienced as we are in this industry. You'll be fine. Just believe in yourself. And actually that's one of the things that's always been important for me in a new role, having that culture of trust and accountability. And if you pick the right company, and you won't find that in every startup, you have to be picky and you have to dig to find out whether that culture exists, and if that's the right culture for you as well. But no, that's never left, and actually that's one of the things that I find most motivating. That something needs to be done. There isn't another person to go and do it. You've got to go and do it, and I love that. I love that challenge. So that for me is one of the reasons I got into it and stayed into it. And one of the reasons I'm still here.
Love that.
I think one of the exciting things about working in this industry is that it is demanded upon you to do something impossible with a group of people. And the fact that you are always faced with challenges that you initially look at a whiteboard and you just go, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. And then at some point, with enough smart people sitting in a room and slamming their head against the desk together, something valuable comes out. And suddenly that problem that looked insurmountable, you got over it. Now you've moved on to the next impossible challenge and you did it together. And so that experience of kind of like the rocket ship with the right group of people is incredibly motivating to me. And I think that to me, the best part of being a part of a business that was super small, I mean, I was the 8th person on the sales team when I got there, and we had the privilege to be able to go through an IPO in the middle of this year, is that suddenly it's very public. It's like you're all in this together. You can all touch it. It's very tangible. And there is this feeling that starts where it's like, you know, the good days y'all feel, the bad days y'all feel. And there is something about that camaraderie that I don't think is so common in the present day and age that you get in technology that is just absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Ori. Eve, are you with us?
Yeah, I've been kicked out of my room, so I think you're gonna have to skip me, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
The joys of working in a co-working space.
Well, yeah, maybe that's what still excites you in tech. Working in open space and moving around from room to room.
I don't think many people are excited about open space, but that's just me.
No. Can I quickly add a shameless plug? So everything, my most recent company is a social finance app, but we've got some of the OGs invested from venture capital. We got a couple of tech co-founders that are now billionaires invested. The music agency of Avicii and Ellie Goulding's manager, loads of really cool people, and we're hiring at a rate of knots. It's in incognito mode, so you won't hear anything, but please hit me up if you're looking to start something in tech or shift over as an experienced hire, and we're going to have tons of positions coming up over the next year, and if you've got what it takes, I'd love to chat to you.
I'm happy to jump in if I still have a minute.
Sure.
I'm sorry. This is one of the upsides when you work in tech. Sometimes you work in like WeWork, and then you're being kicked out of the spot if you stayed in the room too long. So I will tell you that one of the things that I learned the hard way when I just started was that I started, and very quickly I was given a lot of responsibility. I was given these huge budgets that I didn't even comprehend how big they were. And I was in charge of them. And I had to make sure that these budgets that I was actually spending on behalf of the company were not being spent, but invested. We really like to put it that way in marketing terms. So, and one of the things that I do until today, especially when I hire people that have less experience, is that I make sure that rather quickly, I will put a budget that will feel significant in their hands under their responsibility, because this is one of the things that that high tech gives you. You dive in very deep, very quickly, and now it's on you, and you have to make it work. And the fact that you're going to feel a little bit like you're drowning, and you're going to be like, oh my God, what do I do? This challenge, I don't know anything about it. I've never done it before, etc. will force you to, one, do research, and two, most importantly, reach out to the people around you. So this is something that essentially will give you the opportunity to grow as a person, to get beyond your comfort zone, to get used to reaching out to people you don't know, to getting used to building a network within the company that you work at first, and then also beyond. And these are the things that will enable you to develop your career, to find your next jobs, and to maybe someday find the people with whom you want to build a startup from scratch. So this is one of the things that I've learned from the beginning and that I keep with me until now. And I can tell you that this has defined my whole path up to this point.
Amazing. I want to thank you three so much for joining us, Michael, Uri, and Eve. I know you guys have loaded schedules, so clearing up an hour of your time and also a lot of prep work has been incredibly helpful for the attendees, I'm sure. And we've already gotten a lot of thank yous, and I'm sure we'll be getting more over email. So I really appreciate the investment that you made with your time. I want to thank Mara for putting this webinar together. Thank you so much, Mara. I know a lot of thought and time has gone into this. And thank you all for joining us, and thank you for spending the last hour with us. Thank you for listening in and sharing your questions. As shared in the beginning, we'll follow up with, you guys can, you know, look at the chat and get all of these compliments, you know, as I wrap up. Thank you again for this session, and you'll be all getting an email with the recording and some additional materials. Have a great rest of the day, everyone, and thanks again.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys. Bye-bye.